The canvas has been staring at me for 3 days now. Pure white, untouched, almost accusatory in its emptiness. It sits on the easel by the window where the morning light comes in strongest, and every time I walk past it, I feel something clench in my chest. Not fear exactly. Something older than that. Something that remembers. I'm 72 years old, and I haven't painted in 47 years. People ask me sometimes, the few people who still visit, my daughter Linda, my neighbor Mrs. Chen, they ask what I do with all my time now that Thomas is gone. They expect me to say I garden, or I read, or I watch those cooking shows everyone seems to love. They don't expect me to say I'm learning to paint again. They don't know there was ever a again to speak of, but there was. There was a time when painting wasn't something I did with my spare hours. It was who I was. It was the language I spoke most fluently. More fluent than English, more natural than breathing. I could look at the world and see it already translated into color and form, into the relationship between light and shadow, into the way a single brushstroke could capture something that words never could. That was a very long time ago. I'm standing in what used to be Thomas's study. After he died 8 months ago, I couldn't bear to keep it the way it was. His pipe still in the ashtray, his reading glasses on the desk, his presence so heavy in that room that I couldn't breathe when I walked in. So I emptied it, slowly, over weeks. I packed away his things, gave some to Linda, donated others, kept the most precious items in a box in my closet where they wouldn't ambush me with grief every time I turned around. And then, one morning in April, I looked at that empty room and thought, a studio. The thought came from nowhere, or from somewhere so deep inside me that it felt like nowhere. I hadn't thought about painting in decades. I had trained myself not to. But standing in that empty room with the morning sun streaming through the windows Thomas had loved, I suddenly remembered what it felt like to want something just for myself. So I bought an easel. Then I bought canvases. Then I stood in the art supplies store for nearly an hour, overwhelmed by the rows of paint tubes, trying to remember what colors I used to love, what combinations made sense, what I needed. The young man working there must have thought I was lost or confused, another elderly woman who had wandered into the wrong place. But I wasn't lost. I was remembering. I brought everything home and set it up in the studio. That was 2 weeks ago, and now I stand here every morning, and I look at that blank canvas, and I don't know how to begin. It's not that I've forgotten how to hold a brush. The mechanics are still there, buried under decades of other skills. How to fold fitted sheets, how to make a meatloaf that everyone likes, how to balance a checkbook, how to sit quietly in a hospital room. But the other thing, the essential thing, the courage to make that first mark, to commit to a vision, to trust that what's inside me is worth bringing out, that I seem to have lost somewhere along the way. I sit down in the chair by the window. Outside, it's late October. The maple tree in the backyard is dropping its leaves, creating a carpet of red and gold that shifts every time the wind blows. Thomas loved that tree. He planted it the year we bought this house 45 years ago. Linda was 3. Michael wasn't born yet. I close my eyes and let myself remember something I usually don't allow. I let myself remember who I was before I became Thomas's wife, before I became Linda and Michael's mother, before I became the woman who lived in this house and made pot roasts on Sundays and kept everyone's lives running smoothly, while her own dreams grew quiet as snow. I was 23 years old. It was 1976, and I was in my final year at the State University. Majoring in fine arts, I painted every day, sometimes 8 or 10 hours at a stretch, losing track of time, forgetting to eat, living in that heightened state where the world recedes and all that exists is you and the canvas and the infinite possibilities between you. My professor, Dr. Morrison, told me I had real talent. Not the polite kind of compliment you give to every student, but the serious kind, the kind that comes with expectations. She pulled me aside after class one day in March and told me she had submitted my portfolio to graduate programs without telling me 3 of them had accepted me with full scholarships. "Helen," she said, "my name is Helen, Helen Brooks, though it used to be Helen Winters before I married. Helen, you could really do something with this. You have a voice. That's rare. Most students are technically competent, but they're echoing other people's visions. You have your own." I remember how that felt, hearing those words, like suddenly being seen after years of being invisible, like permission to take up space in the world, like a door opening onto a future I had hardly dared to imagine. The letters came in April, 3 thick envelopes, each one an acceptance, each one offering me money and mentorship and the chance to spend years doing nothing but making art. I hid them under my mattress. I don't know why. Maybe because reading them made them too real, and if they were real, I would have to make a decision. That was the same April I met Thomas. He was a friend of my roommate's boyfriend, brought along to a party none of us really wanted to attend. He was 25, 2 years older than me, working as a junior accountant at a firm downtown. He had kind eyes and a steady voice, and when he asked me about my paintings, really asked, really wanted to know, I found myself talking to him for hours, while the party moved around us like a river around a stone. He wasn't like the art students I knew. He didn't talk about theory or movements or who was showing where. He just looked at my work and asked me simple questions. Why did you choose that color? What were you feeling when you painted this? What do you want people to feel when they see it? No one had ever asked me those questions before. Everyone else talked about technique and composition and influences. Thomas asked about the truth underneath. We started seeing each other. Just coffee at first, then dinners, then long walks through the city where he would listen to me talk about art, and I would listen to him talk about his dreams of having a family, of building something stable and good. He had grown up poor, he told me. His father had drunk away every paycheck, and his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. He wanted different. He wanted security, predictability, a life where his children would never wonder if there would be food on the table. I loved that about him, his steadiness. In a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain, the art world especially, where success was arbitrary and poverty was almost a badge of honor, Thomas felt like solid ground. But he also didn't quite understand my need to paint. He tried, I'll give him that. But to him, art was a hobby, something nice that some people did in their spare time. The idea that it could be a vocation, a calling, something worth organizing your whole life around, that didn't make sense to him. What happens when you finish graduate school? He asked me one night in May. We were sitting in his small apartment, and I had just told him about the acceptance letters, about the decision I had to make soon. I paint, I said. I teach, maybe. I apply for residencies and grants. I try to get gallery shows. And financially? It's hard at first. Most artists struggle for years. But if you're good, if you keep working, eventually you might make a living, he finished for me. Or you might not. You might spend your whole life struggling, never quite making it. He wasn't being cruel. He was being practical, which was who he was. But I felt something contract inside me. Some things are worth struggling for, I said quietly. He took my hand. I know. And I admire that about you, Helen. I do. But I also think about the future, about stability, about having a family. You can have both, I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Can you? He asked. Really? How do you raise children when you're working 12-hour days in a studio? How do you give them stability when you're not sure where next month's rent is coming from? I didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, I had been thinking about the same things. I had watched my professor, Dr. Morrison, who was brilliant and dedicated and alone at 52, who had sacrificed relationships and family for her art. I had watched other artists, older students, struggling to pay rent, living in tiny apartments, working restaurant jobs to fund their studio time. It was a beautiful life in some ways, but it was also hard, precarious, lonely. And I was tired of being lonely. My own childhood had been quiet and distant. My parents were good people, but they were formal, reserved, not given to displays of affection. I grew up in a house where emotions were kept carefully contained, where you didn't make a fuss, where you learned to be independent because no one was going to swoop in and save you. Art had been my refuge, the place where I could express everything that had no place in my daily life. But sometimes, late at night, I wanted something different. I wanted warmth. I wanted someone to come home to. I wanted to build the kind of family I had never quite had, full of laughter and affection and messy, abundant love. Thomas offered that. He was offering me a life where I would be cherished, where I would belong to someone who saw me and wanted me, not for my talent or my potential, but for myself. The letters sat under my mattress. May turned into June. I had to decide soon. The programs needed confirmation, and I was running out of time. I remember the night I made my choice. It wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning bolt moment of clarity. Thomas and I were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant, and he told me he loved me. Just said it, simple and direct, over plates of spaghetti. And then he said, "I want to build a life with you, Helen. I want us to get married, to have children, to grow old together. I think we could be really happy." I looked at him across the table. His honest face, his steady hands, his absolute certainty. And I thought about the alternative. Graduate school, years of uncertainty, the possibility of success, but also the strong probability of failure, the lonely garrets and cheap ramen and constant struggle. "I want that too," I heard myself say. And I meant it. I really did. In that moment, I wanted the life he was offering more than I wanted the life those letters promised. I went home that night and took the acceptance letters out from under my mattress. I read them one more time, letting myself feel the full weight of what I was giving up. Then I wrote polite letters declining each offer. I thanked them for their faith in me. I told them I had decided to pursue other opportunities. I didn't tell them I was choosing love over art, marriage over graduate school, Thomas over myself. I didn't tell them that part of me felt like I was committing a small murder, killing off a version of myself that would now never get to exist. I sealed the letters. I mailed them the next morning, and then I put my brushes in a box and pushed them under the bed. Thomas and I got married that September in a small ceremony with just our families and a few friends. I wore a plain white dress that I purchased off the shelf. We couldn't afford anything fancy. Thomas was still establishing himself in his career, and I just graduated with a degree that suddenly felt useless. But we were happy. I was happy. I told myself I was happy. We relocated to a neighborhood where we could hardly afford a small apartment. I was hired to work as a dental office receptionist. Although it wasn't what I had envisioned for myself, it was important that it covered the bills. It was the responsible course of action. Sometimes after work in the evenings, I would pull out a sketchbook and start drawing. Nothing serious, just small studies. Thomas's profile as he read the newspaper, the view from our kitchen window, the coffee pot catching the morning light. However, I didn't paint. We couldn't afford the time, space, and materials needed for painting. The level of dedication needed to paint seemed incompatible with the life I was creating. After 2 years, Linda was born. Michael came 3 years after that. and whatever was left of my artistic identity completely vanished along with the kids. I have no complaints. I want to make that clear. I loved my children with a fierceness that surprised me. I loved the weight of Linda in my arms, the smell of Michael's head, the sound of their laughter filling our home. I loved being needed in that complete, overwhelming way that motherhood demands. However, I also vanished. Not all at once. It was gradual, like snow melting. The sketchbooks ceased first. There was no time between feedings and diaper changes and laundry and cleaning. There simply weren't enough hours in the day. Then the part of my brain that thought in terms of color and composition went quiet. I saw only the world's utilitarian aspects. The groceries that needed to be purchased, the bills that needed to be paid, and the kitchen that needed to be cleaned. I improved my efficiency. I organized myself. I became the kind of mother who always had snacks in her purse and Band-Aids in her pocket. I became the mother of Linda and Michael, the wife of Thomas, the person who organized playdates, volunteered for school bake sales, and managed everyone's schedules. People would ask me sometimes, "What do you do?" And I would say, "I'm a stay-at-home mom," and they would nod, satisfied, and move on to other topics. I was never asked if I had ever been someone else. No one thought to wonder if there was more to me than what they could see. On rare occasions, someone would take notice of my perspective. We'd be at a park, and I'd be watching the light filter through the leaves in a particular way, and another mother would say, "You're really studying that tree, aren't you?" And I would laugh it off and say something about how pretty it was, and we'd move on. But inside, something would ache. A dull, distant ache, like an old injury that never quite healed right. The box of brushes stayed under the bed in the apartment, then under the stairs when we bought the house. Then eventually I forgot exactly where it was. Not really forgot. I always knew it was somewhere tucked away, but forgot in the way you forget about dreams you've decided not to pursue. You know they existed once, but they don't feel real anymore. The years passed. Linda grew up and went to college. Michael followed. Thomas's career progressed steadily. He made partner at his firm, and we had more money, more security, exactly what he had always wanted. We took vacations. We made changes to the kitchen. When Linda gave birth to Emma, we became grandparents. We had built a good life, a stable life, the kind of life Thomas had dreamed of as a child, watching his father drink away their future. And I was grateful for it. I really was. There were evenings when Thomas and I would sit on the back porch watching the sun set behind the maple tree, and I would feel a deep contentment settle over me like a warm blanket. This was enough. It was a good one. But there was also something else. A whisper so quiet I could only hear it in the very early morning or very late at night. A small voice that asked, "What happened to Helen Winters? What happened to the girl who could look at the world and translate it into something beautiful? What happened to her voice?" I'm 72 years old now, standing in this studio that used to be Thomas's study, and I still don't have an answer to that question. On a Tuesday, Thomas passed away. He was cutting the hedge in the front yard when he suddenly suffered a severe heart attack. Our neighbor found him and called 911, but he was already gone. As simple as that. 46 years of marriage ended in an instant on an ordinary Tuesday in February. The loss was immense. I had expected we would have more time. Thomas was 74 and healthy, or so we thought. We had plans, a trip to see Michael in California, a cruise Linda wanted us to take with her family. We were going to have more years, more ordinary Tuesdays, more evenings on the back porch, but we didn't. It was a big funeral. Thomas had been adored. He was one of those dependable, steady men who always showed up when you needed him, kept his word, and gave others a sense of security. The church was full of colleagues and neighbors and friends, all sharing stories about his kindness, his integrity, his quiet generosity. I sat in the front pew listening to them describe my husband, and I recognized the man they were talking about. But I also realized I was discovering things about him I had never known. He had mentored young accountants at his firm. He had quietly paid for a neighbor's child's medical treatment. He had volunteered at a homeless shelter every Saturday for years. Without ever mentioning it to me, I had lived with this man for 46 years, and there were parts of him I had never seen. I began to question what aspects of myself had also been hidden. The weeks after the funeral were the hardest. The house felt enormous and empty without Thomas in it. I would wake up in the morning and reach for him before remembering I would make coffee for two and then have to pour 1 cup down the sink. I would start to tell him something and turn to find an empty chair. Linda invited me to spend some time with her family. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone right now," she responded. I could see it in her eyes that she was concerned about me. She thought I was fragile, that I might break under the weight of grief. I didn't want to go, though. With Thomas's presence still permeating every room, I had to be in this house. I had to sit with the loss, experience it completely, and figure out how to be Helen without Thomas by her side, telling her, "I'll be all right. I need some time." Every day she called to see how I was doing. Michael from California did the same. They were loving, observant, and decent kids. They had done well. There was cause for pride in that. The empty study bothered me most. As I passed it, I would sense the concentration of Thomas's absence, as though there was more of him in that room than any other. Finally, in April, 8 weeks after the funeral, I decided I had to do something about it. I started slowly. First, just cleaning, dusting, opening the windows to let fresh air in. After that, he packed his papers, books, and his beloved fountain pen collection. Linda came over to help, and together we sorted through 40 years of accumulated life. "What are you going to do with the room?" she asked as we worked. My response was, "I don't know yet, but I did know. I already knew, deep down somewhere." That night, after Linda left, I found myself in the basement looking through old boxes. Before I found the wooden box that contained my brushes, palette knives, and old sketch pads, I had no idea what I was looking for. I opened it in the living room after carrying it upstairs. I was first struck by the smell of dried paint, turpentine, and linseed oil. Smell is the strongest sense tied to memory, they say, and that's true. The scent brought back everything: the studio at university, the focused silence of painting, the feeling of being completely absorbed in something larger than yourself. Age had made the brushes stiff, and some of the bristles were broken or bent. The paint tubes were dried out, useless. However, as I held them in my hands, I experienced a change within. It was a silent recognition. Rather than an abrupt epiphany, I had owned these. I used to speak this language. Is it possible that it will happen again? I visited the art supply store the following day. The young man then gave me a thinly veiled look of bewilderment, wondering why this old woman was in the aisle of oil paint. More than anywhere else in the world, I wanted to tell him that I had once belonged here. I wanted to let him know that I could still recall the precise proportion of ultramarine blue to cadmium yellow that creates the ideal shade of green. However, I simply asked him which brushes he thought a beginner should use. He showed me. I spent money recklessly, buying everything I needed in a way that would have appalled my more sensible, younger self. And here I am now, studio setup. Canvas is awaiting, and I'm afraid. Technical skills are important, but they're not the only thing I'm concerned about. I want to know if I have anything left to say. Whether Helen Winters, who later changed her name to Helen Brooks, then to Mom, and finally to Thomas's widow, still has a voice worth hearing. I'm 72 years old. The majority of people my age are finishing up, settling into retirement, and realizing that the most significant portions of their lives are over. I'm attempting to start a new one right now. It might be stupid. Perhaps I should just join a book club, start a gardening project, or engage in any other activity that is appropriate for women my age. Some doors don't reopen once they're closed, so perhaps I should accept that. However, I can't get Dr. Morrison's statement from all those years ago out of my head. You have a voice. It's not common. But what if it remains? What if all this time it has been waiting? I get up and make my way to the canvas. I pick up a brush. A brand new brush, spotless and promising. Before I can overthink it, I make a mark after dipping it in burnt umber, only one mark. On the white expanse, a simple line. Not much. It's hardly anything. However, it's a beginning. That afternoon, Mrs. Chen comes over with a casserole. She has been bringing food, as if lasagna and chicken pot pie are the cure for grief, ever since Thomas passed away. Though I'm never really hungry these days, I eat the food with gratitude because it's kind. With the ease of someone who comes by frequently, she asks, "How are you doing, Helen?" as she settles into the kitchen chair. I say, "I'm all right," and turn on the tea kettle. Getting by. It's still so hard to believe he's gone. Thomas was such a fixture in the neighborhood. Every time I see that hedge in your front yard, I think of him. I give a nod. Everybody has memories of Thomas. The maple tree, the hedge, and his wave every morning on his way to his car. Mrs. Chen asks abruptly, "You're not thinking of selling, are you?" Linda mentioned you might move closer to her. When I say, "Linda worries too much," I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. It's a lot of house for one person. I'm managing. Over her teacup, she examines me. Mrs. Chen, who is Korean, arrived in America 50 years ago as a young bride. There are women like her who see more than you would like them to. Her words, "You seem different lately." Not bad different, just different. How so? Lighter, maybe. More present. Like you're here instead of somewhere else in your head. Her perception surprises me. The words, "I've been working on a project," come to mind. Oh, what kind of project? I've set up a studio. In Thomas's old study, I'm going to try painting again. Painting? I didn't know you painted. I used to, a long time ago. That's wonderful, Helen. What made you decide to start again? I consider how to respond to that. I suppose I realized I have time now all this time and I can fill it however I want. That's terrifying and freeing all at once. Mrs. Chen grinned. My mother used to say that the third act of life is when you finally get to please yourself. The first act is learning, the second is doing for others, and the third is for yourself. How wise. She was. She took up calligraphy at 75. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the brush at first, but she kept at it. By the time she died at 92, she was quite skilled. That's encouraging. It should be. We're not dead until we're dead. Helen might as well do something interesting with whatever time we have left. I consider that to be the third act after she leaves. Perhaps this is what it is. A new chapter with its own meaning and purpose, rather than a depressing epilogue to a life already lived. I return to my studio. Naturally, the one line I drew this morning has dried and is still there. It appears bolder and more assertive than when I made it. The canvas's blankness has been broken by a single line. Everything is now possible. I study the maple tree by simply gazing out the window during the afternoon. Now that it is completely bare, the branches form elaborate patterns against the gray November sky. I loved painting trees once. Every branch was different, and every point where wood and air met created negative space that was just as significant as the tree itself. I loved the challenge of capturing their complexity. I grabbed my old sketchbook and a pencil. The pages, which contain drawings from my time at university, are fragile and yellowed. I find a blank page near the back and flip past them without paying much attention because I'm trying to concentrate on the present, and that's the past. I begin sketching the tree. At first, my hand feels uncertain and stiff. The lines are tentative and unsteady. However, as I continue, something begins to awaken. Perhaps muscle memory or something more profound. It's all still there, buried but not gone. The way my hand follows, the way my eye follows the branches, the way I can see the three-dimensional form and convert it into 2 dimensions. I spend an hour sketching the tree from various perspectives, filling multiple pages. It's pleasant. Not like riding a bike. That analogy isn't quite accurate. Speaking a language you learned as a child but didn't use for decades is more akin to that. You still need to feel your way back to fluency, but the grammar and basic structure are still there. My eyes are tired, and my hand is cramping when I finally stop. However, I feel engaged, which is something I haven't felt in a long time. That sense of being fully absorbed in something that matters, that challenges you, that asks for your complete attention. I have been missing this. That night, Linda makes her daily check-in call. "How was your day, Mom?" "Good," I reply. "I worked in the studio for a while." "The studio?" "I've turned your father's study into an art studio. I'm going to try painting again." The person on the other end of the line is pausing. "Painting? I didn't know you painted." Mrs. Chen said the same thing. "I understand that before I became their mother, my kids had no idea who I was. I've always been mom to them, whole and whole, with no past that predates them." Telling Linda, "I studied art in college," I say, "Before I met your father, I was quite serious about it." "I never knew that. Why did you stop?" How can I make it understandable to her? Linda is a 45-year-old marketing executive who is married and has 2 kids. She has successfully balanced a family and a career. Compared to my generation, hers does that more readily. I say, it was a different time. At last, women didn't always get to do both. I chose family. And now? Now I'm choosing myself. One more pause. "That's great, Mom, really. I think it's healthy for you to have something to focus on." She has good intentions, but I can hear the underlying message. This is a harmless pastime to pass the time, grief therapy, or a way to stay busy. She doesn't realize that this is like taking back a core aspect of my identity. It's okay, though. She doesn't have to comprehend. This is not for anyone else but for me. I paint every day for the next several weeks. In order to remember how various brushes behave, how paint mixes, and how color works, I start out by working small, just sketches and studies. It's annoying. Previously intuitive things now require conscious thought. When I mix a blue, it turns out to be too dull, too gray, or too purple. When I attempt to depict a leaf's curve, it appears flat and lifeless. I'm discovering that muscle memory is insufficient. Although technical proficiency is crucial, art is not brought to life by it. That other thing, the voice and vision that Dr. Morrison described as uncommon, is what I'm truly looking for. Is it still in existence, or did all those years of neglect cause it to atrophy? On some mornings, I wake up feeling dejected, certain that this is a mistake, that I'm too old to start over, and that whatever talent I may have had is gone forever. I consider putting everything away, acknowledging that this was a bad idea, and going back to being a widow with too much free time. However, something will stir within me when I notice the color of the winter sky or the way the light strikes the kitchen counter. I'll be examining it from the perspective of paint. What color combination would produce that specific shade? What method would capture that light quality? And I'll come to understand that a part of me still sees the world through the eyes of an artist. December comes, I'm invited to join Linda's family for Christmas. We've always done it, but I'm hesitant this year, telling her I'd rather stay here. Would you all consider coming here instead? Mom, that's a lot of work for you. You shouldn't have to. I want to. Please, I want Christmas in my own home this year. I can hear her worry, but she agrees. She fears that I'm withdrawing and that I'm not dealing with Thomas's passing in a healthy manner, but I'm not looking for solitude. It's space. Space to be myself free from the continual scrutiny, criticism, and worry of others, room to struggle, fail, and solve problems without needing to defend or explain. In addition to spending hours in the studio, I spend the days leading up to Christmas cooking and getting ready. Now, instead of just studying, I'm working on a real painting. It depicts the maple tree in the fall. Just before Thomas passed away, I tried to depict not just the tree itself, but also its significance. All those years of beauty and shade, its consistency, and the way it marked the passing of time, using both my memory and the sketches I made. Nothing is going well. Although the composition is passable and the colors are appropriate, something is lacking. The painting seems academic and rigid, more like a skillful replica than a living thing. I've managed to capture the tree's appearance, but not its texture. On Christmas Eve, I am standing in front of it, feeling frustrated, when Linda's younger daughter Emma enters the studio. "Grandma, Mom says dinner is ready. Oh wow, are you painting?" "Trying to," I reply. Emma, 19, is spending the holidays at home after attending college. She approaches to examine the canvas. "That's the tree in the backyard." "Yes." She tilts her head and says, "It's good, but it seems like you're being really careful with it, really controlled." "What do you mean?" "I don't know, it's pretty, but it doesn't feel like you really went for it. Does that make sense?" It's very logical out of babies' mouths, telling her, "You're absolutely right." Being with my family at dinner makes me feel both close and far away. Enjoying the roasted chicken Linda brought, hearing Emma discuss her philosophy class, and seeing my grandson play with his new toy are all things that make me feel like I'm here. However, a part of me is in the studio reflecting on Emma's words and what it means to truly pursue your goals. I return to the painting once everyone has left. I gaze at this meticulous, regulated representation of the maple tree for a long time. I then scrape off sizable portions of it using a palette knife. I experiment with new hues, bolder, more daring combinations. I use larger gestures and looser brush strokes. I try to capture the feeling, the essence, rather than every little detail. I work until my eyes get dry and my back hurts. It's 2 a.m. when I eventually take a step back. Now the painting is different. It's less polished and messier. Some components aren't quite functional. However, it's alive in a way that wasn't previously. It moves and has energy. It appears to be a painting by Helen Winters rather than Helen Brooks, mimicking the appearance of a tree. For the first time in months, I had a good night's sleep that night. A phone call that transforms everything arrives in January. The voice on the other end is young, female, and professional. "Mrs. Brooks?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm calling from the Riverside Gallery downtown. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she's my aunt. She told me you've taken up painting again, and I was wondering if you might be interested in showing some work." I nearly dropped the phone because I'm so shocked. "Showing? You mean in your gallery? We have a program for emerging local artists." I know emerging is usually a term for younger artists, but we're trying to expand that definition. "My aunt showed me some photos of your work, and I think it could be really interesting." She took photos? She said you wouldn't mind, was she wrong? What a cunning woman Mrs. Chen is. She must have used the spare key I gave her for emergencies to enter when I was away one day. I haven't painted in almost 50 years. I'm just getting back to it. That's exactly what makes it interesting, Sarah explains. We're putting together an exhibition called Late Bloomers. Artists over 60 who are either beginning or returning to their practice after a long hiatus. I think your work would fit perfectly. I don't know if I have enough pieces. The show isn't until April. You have time, and we're only looking for 5 or 6 pieces from each artist. Would you be willing to meet with me and discuss it? I should decline. It's too soon and too much pressure. I'm not prepared. The quality of the work is inadequate. One can decline for 1,000 reasons. Yes, I say to myself. I'd like to meet with you. Next week we decide on a date. I sit in the kitchen for a while after I hang up, my heart pounding. A display. A real gallery exhibition. Something I stopped even letting myself dream about. Something I used to dream about when I was a young woman. I visit the studio and examine my possessions. The painting of the maple tree. A few studies of the kitchen in various lighting conditions. I began a portrait of Thomas based on an old photo. They all feel inadequate and unfinished. However, I have 3 months. That might be enough time. After that, I work with a new level of intensity. Every morning by 8, or sometimes earlier, I'm in the studio. I work until my back stops me, or my eyes are too exhausted to see clearly. I'm painting my surroundings, including my home, my neighborhood, and the commonplace items that fill my days. However, I'm painting memory as well. I begin a series based on bits and pieces of my early life, such as the university studio, my first small apartment with Thomas, and Linda as a baby, dozing in a sunny spot. They're rough paintings. I'm still learning what I want to say and how to say it, and I'm still working on getting back to fluency. However, they are truthful. I own them. In late January, Sarah Chen visits my home to check out the projects I've been working on. She has sharp eyes that take in everything, an easy confidence, and is younger than I thought she would be, maybe 30. She moves slowly through the studio, silently examining each painting. As anxious as a student awaiting a grade, I wait by the door. She says, "These are good, at last. Really good. You have a strong sense of light, and your color choices are bold but not garish." There's a maturity in the work that I really respond to. Maturity, I say once more. Is that a nice way of saying they look old-fashioned? She chuckles. No, I mean there's a depth of feeling here that you don't usually see in younger artists. Like you've lived with these subjects, really lived with them, and you're painting from that lived experience. She pauses before the painting of Linda as a newborn. This one especially, the tenderness in it is extraordinary, but also... She draws nearer. There's something else. Exhaustion, maybe? Or a kind of melancholy mixed with the love. Her perception surprises me. Remembering those early days of motherhood, the overwhelming love and the overwhelming loss of self had been the source of that painting. When I say, "You see a lot," that's my job. Helen, can I call you Helen? I'd like you to be part of the show. I think your work will resonate with people. There's authenticity in it that's rare. For the next hour, we talk about practical issues like publicity, artist statements, pricing, and framing. It's simultaneously thrilling and overwhelming. By the time she's gone, I'm both excited and afraid. A statement by the artist I have to write about my work, my goals, and my process. That night, I take a seat with a blank sheet of paper and search for the right words. As an artist, who am I? What am I attempting to convey? I write and mark things out. Write and mark it out. All of it sounds pretentious, cliched, or untrue. Lastly, I just write, I gave up painting when I was 25 in order to devote myself to my family. I'm relearning how to paint after 47 years. The theme of these pieces is rediscovery, of color, of vision, of the self I had forgotten for almost 50 years. They are about what's left over after everything else has been taken away. It's true, but it's not very poetic. I can only say that. The work-related months of January through April fly by. I paint with a level of concentration that I haven't had since I was a child. I'm learning a lot about myself as well as technical skills. What catches my attention, what inspires me, and what I wish to spend my time photographing wintertime in the neighborhood, bare trees, gray skies, the unique quality of cold light, is when I paint it. I depict Mrs. Chen preparing dumplings in her kitchen. Thomas used to sit in the empty chair, which I paint. I depict age and endurance, loss and perseverance, memory and the present. Some paintings are effective, others don't. I'm getting better at recognizing the difference and admitting when something isn't quite right. Additionally, I'm learning to complete tasks, to put an end to tinkering, and to declare a piece finished. One afternoon, Linda stops by and finds me in the studio, completely engrossed and covered in paint. She asks from the doorway, "Mom?" I flinch. "Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. I knocked, you didn't answer. I was working." She enters and surveys the space, with paintings in various stages of completion, sketches pinned to the walls, and supplies arranged on shelves. The studio has evolved into a legitimate workspace. "This is incredible, Mom. I had no idea you were doing all this." "I'm preparing for a show at Riverside Gallery in April." Her eyes enlarge. "A show? Like a real exhibition?" "Yes." She gives me a hug and says, "That's amazing." I can sense her surprise mixed with something else. Perhaps pride, or maybe just a change in her perception of me. "I'm so proud of you. Does Michael know?" she said. "Not yet. I wanted to wait until it was closer." She examines every painting as she moves through the studio. She stops when she reaches the picture of her as a baby. "Is that me?" "Yes, from a photograph your father took." She remains silent for a while. "It's beautiful, but also sad? Is that crazy?" "No, it was a complicated time. I loved you so much, but I was also lost in a way I didn't know how to articulate." "Lost how? How can I tell my daughter this without making her feel bad about being alive?" "I had given up painting when you were born. I didn't think I could do both, be an artist and be a good mother. So I chose motherhood, and I don't regret that choice. But there was a cost. A part of me went silent for a very long time." Linda takes a seat in the window-side chair. "I never knew. You always seemed so content." "I was content in many ways, but contentment isn't the same as fulfillment." "Are you fulfilled now?" I consider that query. "I'm getting there. I'm remembering who I was before I became defined by my relationships to other people. Helen before she was Thomas's wife, or your mother, just Helen." Linda says, "I like her," quietly. A warm April evening brings the exhibition's opening night. After a long winter, spring has finally arrived, and the street-side cherry trees are in full bloom. I dress nicely, wearing a basic black dress, nice shoes, and a blue scarf that makes me feel both put together and comfortable. I hardly recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I feel differently, not because I look differently. A light that hasn't been present in my eyes for decades is now present. I'm driven to the gallery by Linda. To be here, Michael and his partner took a plane from California. Emma arrives directly from the university Mrs. Chen, her Aunt Sarah, and apparently half the neighborhood are present as well. With its white walls, polished concrete floors, and ideal lighting, the gallery is stunning. A 68-year-old man who began sculpting after retiring from teaching, a 75-year-old woman who began taking photographs in her grief after losing her husband, and a 63-year-old former accountant who finally allowed herself to paint after years of handling everyone else's taxes are all included in the same section as my paintings. All of us are late bloomers. Everyone who was told, or who told themselves, that you have to have fulfilled your dreams by a specific age, and if you haven't, then it's just too bad. However, we are now demonstrating that to be untrue. I look at my own artwork on these walls as I stroll through the gallery. The paintings appear more formal, finished, and realistic here than they did in my studio. The maple tree is there in all its fall splendor. Mrs. Chen and her dumplings are there. Linda as a baby is shown there. Thomas's chair is empty. This is the view at dawn from my kitchen window. I live it, transformed into form, color, and paint, displayed for public viewing. People begin to arrive. I know a few, but not many. As they stroll through the gallery, they take in the artwork, read the artist's statements, and pause occasionally to chat. For a long time, I observe an elderly woman standing in front of my painting of the vacant chair. Tears are streaming down her face. She catches my attention when she eventually moves on, and I recognize her. She is aware she has experienced it. The maple tree painting is studied by a younger couple, perhaps in their 40s. The woman remarks, "The colors are so bold, but they work. There's something joyful about it despite the subject." Her partner responds, "I think that's the point. Finding joy in ordinary things, in what persists." I didn't fully understand what I was trying to say, but they're getting it. Sarah Chen discovers me observing people interact with my work from a distance, saying, "You're a hit." We've already had 3 serious inquiries about purchasing pieces. People want to buy them? This truly astounds me. Of course they do. Helen, these are good paintings. I wouldn't have shown them if they weren't. I get approached by people to chat all evening long. Some merely wish to express that they found the work enjoyable. Others have inquiries concerning method or technique. Some people are curious about my background and how I started painting at this point in my life. I give them a condensed version of it. I went to college to study art, but stopped to raise a family. I made the decision to try again after my husband passed away. I keep the difficulty of making that initial mark on the canvas from them. The number of times I nearly gave up. At a time when most people have given up trying new things, I am so afraid of failing. However, they might be able to see that anyhow. Perhaps the paintings contain it. A woman comes up to me at the end of the night. She has smart eyes, is well-dressed, and is most likely in her 50s. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm Margaret Stevens. I teach art history at the university." The university. All those years ago, I was a student at my university. She goes on to say, "I wanted to tell you how much your work moves me. There's a quality to it that's quite remarkable, a sort of hard-won wisdom mixed with genuine discovery, like someone who's seeing the world with both ancient and new eyes at once." I managed to say, "Thank you. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to come speak to my students sometime. About your journey, about returning to art after such a long hiatus. I think they could learn a lot from your perspective. I'm not sure I have much wisdom to offer. On the contrary." Most of my students are 20 years old and convinced they have to have everything figured out immediately. They think if they haven't made it by 30, they've failed. Your example could be powerful for them. I agree to give it some thought. After giving me her card, she leaves. Later, when most people have gone, I stand by myself in the gallery and take another look at my paintings. Linda appears next to me. She asks, "How does it feel?" Sincerely, "Strange," I say. Good strange, but strange. Like I'm seeing my inner life made public, like I've been invisible for so long that being seen is almost uncomfortable. "You're not invisible, Mom. You've never been invisible to us." "I know, but I was invisible to myself." She grasps my hand. "I'm glad you found your way back." Things change in unexpected ways. In the weeks after the exhibition, Mrs. Chen preparing dumplings and the maple tree are two of my paintings that sell. It doesn't really matter that the money isn't much. That someone appreciated my work enough to want to live with it, hang it on their wall, and look at it every day is what counts. I continue to paint. Once awakened, the urge to create never goes away. I work most mornings, and occasionally in the afternoons I'm painting more confidently and faster now. Additionally, I'm painting in a different way, taking more chances and being more concerned with the honesty of each piece than with its perfection. Regarding speaking to her class, Margaret Stevens gets in touch with me. I agree, but I'm anxious about it. On a Tuesday morning in May, I drive to campus, and as I make my way through the quad toward the arts building, I'm struck by a wave of memories that almost stops me cold. This is where I grew up. I first discovered what it meant to view the world through the eyes of an artist here. Everything is different. Even though the buildings are the same, I am unique. I share my journey with the students, about 20 of them. I'm open about the decision I made when I was 25, the years I didn't paint, and my fear of beginning anew. One young woman asks, "But why did you stop? Why did you think you couldn't do both? Paint and have a family?" "Because that's what women of my generation were told," I respond, explicitly or implicitly. You could be an artist or a mother, but probably not both. Not seriously. The world wasn't set up to support women trying to do both. Her words, "That's so sad." It was reality. Things are better now for your generation, though still not equal. But you have options I didn't have. One of the young men holds up his hand. "Do you regret it? Stopping, I mean?" I've been asking myself that question. Slowly, yes and no, I reply. I regret losing those years of creative development. Who knows what kind of artist I might have become if I'd kept working. But I don't regret my children or my marriage or the life I built. I just wish I hadn't thought it had to be either or. I wish someone had told me I could find a way to do both, even if imperfectly. Another student asks, "What would you tell your younger self?" To be brave, to not give up so easily on the things that make you yourself. To understand that sacrifice is sometimes necessary, but martyrdom helps no one. A number of students approach me one-on-one after class to speak with me. One young woman tells me that rather than pursuing art, her parents are pressuring her to enroll in law school. She fears both disappointing them and having to live someone else's life. I say to her, "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that the voice inside you that wants to make art, it doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It just gets quieter. And the longer you ignore it, the harder it is to hear again." With tears in her eyes, she nods, "Thank you." I think about that young woman on the way home. Think of all the different people I was, the self-assured art student, the unsure young wife, the loving mother, the widow learning to live alone, the artist finding her voice again. As someone once said, we contain multitudes. We are not a single entity. All of our past selves are layered on top of one another, influencing one another. Helen Winters Brooks is my name. My age is 72. I am a mother, a grandmother, and a widow. I'm also an artist, not aspirational, not a novice, just trying to be. Yes, I am. Now that June has arrived, the back porch where Thomas and I used to sit is shaded by the full, green maple tree. Not as it was in the fall or winter, but as it is now, vital, alive, reaching toward the sun. I'm painting it again. Sometimes I think of my former professor, Dr. Morrison, who recognized something in me all those years ago. She passed away 5 years ago. According to my recent internet research, I never had the opportunity to tell her that her words stuck with me throughout the decades of silence, that I had finally remembered who I was. Perhaps, though, she was aware. Perhaps she realized that sometimes it takes a long time for seeds to become active. Mrs. Chen now visits for tea most afternoons. While I work, we chat in the studio. This neighbor, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, has grown to be one of my best friends. One day, she notes, "You're different than you were a year ago." How so? More present. More yourself, if that makes sense. Like you were always performing before, being what everyone needed you to be, and now you're just being. She is correct. I'm discovering how to occupy space in a manner that I never previously permitted. To express my opinions, to fulfill my desires, to follow my passions without feeling guilty about them. It's not being self-centered, it's self-respect. Mrs. Chen's mother referred to it as the third act, the act that allows you to finally enjoy yourself. One evening, Linda calls with some news. "Mom, Emma's decided to minor in art. She says you inspired her." "Really?" "Really. She told me that seeing you start over, seeing you be brave enough to try something everyone thought you were too old for, it made her realize she shouldn't be afraid to follow her own interests." I sit with that for a while after we hang up. I've worried about whether I was being a good enough mother, and the example I was setting for my kids for a large portion of my life. I never thought that choosing myself at 72 would be the most significant lesson I could ever impart to them. I've been painting seriously for almost a year, and it's September. The studio is filled with finished pieces, all of which are mine, some of which are good, some of which are not. I paint every day out of passion rather than duty. It has returned to being as natural as breathing. Sarah Chen calls with additional information. In the spring, the gallery hopes to host a solo exhibition of my artwork. It's just me this time, not a group show. A complete gallery of my paintings, 30 pieces. "I don't know if I can do that," I respond. "That's a lot of work." "Helen, you paint all the time. You'll have more than enough pieces. Say yes." "Yes," I reply. "I'm working on a self-portrait in the studio that evening. I've been avoiding it because it's too direct and revealing, but I thought it was time. I arrange a mirror and examine my face, study it thoroughly, just like I would any other subject. I spot an elderly woman. That's the plain fact. Age spots on my hands, wrinkles around my mouth and eyes, gray hair, and skin that has lost its suppleness are all effects of 72 years. However, I also perceive strength. I see eyes that have seen loss and creation, happiness and sorrow. A face that has earned every line and every mark of time is what I see. I begin painting. I spend weeks refining and adding layers to the self-portrait. I'm attempting to convey the truth about who I am, not just how I appear. I was an artist. I became a mother, and I continue to develop as a woman. It's the most difficult thing I've ever painted. I always find something more that needs to be done when I think it's done. However, a face gradually appears on the canvas after numerous sessions. It's my face. It's more than that, though it is both strong and vulnerable, defiant and tender, timeless and ageless. I take a step back and give it a thorough inspection when I finally declare it finished, and I like what I see for the first time in a long time. For Thanksgiving, Michael comes to visit. As a new tradition, We're doing it at my house once more. Michael enters the studio where I work, while Linda and her family are in the kitchen making dinner. He asks, "Can I watch?" "Sure." He takes a seat in Thomas's old chair by the window and listens quietly while I paint. It's a simple still life of an apple bowl in the morning light. After some time, he says, "I never knew you could do this. I'm learning." "No, I mean, this is really good, Mom. You're really talented." "Thank you." "Did you always want to be an artist?" "Yes, from the time I was very young." "Why didn't you?" "I did for a while, and then I made other choices." "Do you regret those choices?" I consider my response. "I regret not finding a way to keep some part of this alive, but I don't regret you or your sister or the life I had with your father." "But you gave up something important." "I did, and I'm reclaiming it now." He is silent for a while. I think that's brave. That means a lot coming from my quiet, reserved son. Michael Winter returns. It's been a year since I started painting. I commemorate the anniversary in private, but it passes with little fanfare. It has been a year since my initial canvas mark. A year of self-discovery. I'm making steady progress toward my April solo exhibition. I paint the neighborhood throughout the year, the people in my life, and the memories that unexpectedly come to mind. I paint endings and beginnings, aging and rebirth, loss and perseverance. Certain days are more difficult than others. On certain mornings, I awaken to the physical limitations of my aging body and the weight of my years. I have arthritis in my hands. Standing at the easel for hours causes my back to ache. My eyes no longer get tired as quickly as they once did. However, I continue to paint because I am this person. It's because of my age, not in spite of it. The work contains everything I've gone through, everything I've lived, everything I've lost, and everything I've found. You have to have lived deeply in order to paint with such depth. Another portrait of Mrs. Chen. I'm working on a series about her, capturing various facets of her personality. In this one, her entire face is changed by joy as she laughs. She remarks, "You make me look beautiful." After I show her the rough sketch, "You are beautiful." I'm old. We're all old. That doesn't mean we're not beautiful. One of my favorite paintings is the one of Mrs. Chen laughing. It's full of life and defiant joy. With my work, I hope to convey the message that we are still here. We remain essential. There are still many of us. March brings with it the last push to finish the exhibition pieces. I put in a lot of overtime because I'm motivated by both excitement and deadlines. It's my show, my exhibition by myself, the goal I had as a young woman but never succeeded in achieving. I guess it's better late than never. Actually, though, I'm beginning to believe that it's not late at all. It came at precisely the right time. I would have painted and spoken differently if I had achieved success as an artist at the age of 25. I wouldn't have had this voice, this particular perspective. Perhaps everything happens when it should, even if it seems impossible to wait. It's an amazing first night for my solo exhibition. The gallery is crowded with people from the university class I spoke to, other artists I met through the gallery, strangers who read about the show, Linda and her family, Michael and his partner, Mrs. Chen, and half the neighborhood. My paintings are all over the walls, a whole year's labor, a lifetime of observation, the maple tree in every season, portraits of the people I care about, still lifes of memory paintings from my early years are all examples of how my life is reflected back to me as I stroll through the gallery, and the self-portrait in the middle of the main wall. In front of it, people congregate. I listen to their remarks while standing apart. Somebody remarks, "It's so honest." Another observes, "You can see everything she's been through." It's about more than just age. It's about survival, about persistence. "Are you the artist?" asks a young woman I don't know. "Yes." "Your self-portrait. It made me cry. My grandmother died last year, and looking at your painting, I felt like I was seeing her. Really seeing her. Not just as my grandmother, but as a whole person with her own dreams and disappointments and victories. Thank you for that. This is the reason we create art. Not for prestige, wealth, or fame, though those are acceptable if they materialize. We create art in order to communicate, connect, and lessen our sense of isolation. Sarah Chen comes up to me later that night with a man I don't know. "Helen, this is David Wu. He's a collector who focuses on late-career artists." David gives me a handshake. "Your work is remarkable, Mrs. Brooks, truly. I'd like to discuss possibly representing you more broadly, showing your work in other galleries." I'm in disbelief. I don't know what to say. "Say you'll think about it. Here's my card. No pressure, but I think your work deserves a wider audience." Sarah thanks me after he leaves, saying, "This is big, Helen. David Wu doesn't rep just anyone." I don't even know if I want to be repped. As you say, I just want to paint. You can do both. Can I? At 72, can I still have this new life and this new identity as an artist? Can I enter this area that I have long denied myself? I believe so. I can indeed. 6 weeks are allotted for the exhibition. 12 paintings are sold during that period. 2 other galleries approach me. I do an interview for a magazine article about creative awakenings in later life. I've been asked to speak at more women's groups, senior centers, and university classes. It is simultaneously overwhelming, amazing, draining, and thrilling. But the fact that I'm still painting is what counts most. I create the work that is important to me every day in my studio. Everything else is merely background noise. 1 year has passed since I spoke with those college students, and it is now May. Thomas's tree, a maple, is swaying in the breeze as I sit on the back porch. I am working on preliminary sketches for a new painting in a sketchbook that I am holding in my lap. The doorbell rings. A young woman is standing on my porch when I answer it. She appears anxious. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm sorry to just show up. I'm Melissa. I was in Professor Stevens's class when you came to speak. I'm graduating next week." "Congratulations." "Thank you. I wanted to tell you something. Remember how I talked to you after class about my parents wanting me to go to law school?" I give a nod. I didn't go. I applied to MFA programs instead. I got into 3 of them. I'm going to be a painter. Now she's weeping, and it's because of you. Because you showed me it's never too late, which means it's also not too early. You showed me that giving up on yourself is the real tragedy, not trying and maybe failing. I give this young lady, whom I hardly know, a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you. I just wanted you to know that you changed my life. I spend a lot of time sitting on the porch after she leaves. All the lives we affect, without even realizing it, are on my mind. All the repercussions we cause simply by deciding to be who we truly are. My age is 72. I'm an artist. I am both a grandmother and a mother. I am a widow. I am a friend. I live next door. As a woman, I gave up my dreams only to rediscover them. All of these and more describe me, and I haven't finished yet by no means. I still have things I want to say, visions to capture, and paintings to complete. I have time, paint, and canvas. Not as much time as I had when I was 25, but enough to complete the important tasks. I take up my sketchbook and draw some more. The afternoon light, the maple tree, and the potential that each blank page holds. My 3rd act is this one, my late bloom, my reclaiming, and it's only getting started.